Thank you all for coming. It's great to see everybody back. A lot of old faces. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but faces that I know rather than old faces. It's nice to be back up and running. We've only got this one going at the moment, but we're going to have a programme hopefully sorted out in the not too distant future and really get back to normal. But for the evening, we've got an eminent speaker here, so I'm not going to say anything more. I'll leave you to introduce your speech. Oh, you want to do one as well? Do you? Jolly good.
I do very well.
Good man. There you go.
No, I'm not really going to do a speech. I'm really here to introduce my friend, my ancient friend. No, my long-term friend, Brendan Walsh, who is now doing a splendid job, I think, as the editor of the tablet. I've known him for 10 years. We worked together at the Catholic Truth Society, and we managed to defeat the forces of the Holy Office on at least one occasion. Really hilarious. And he was, to me, a great support and a jolly loyal comrade. I'm very grateful to him for having agreed to come tonight, and I pass you over to him for the best we can do for 10 things that the editor of the tablet must avoid.
I can't remember now. 10 things I keep in my mind as editor of the tablet.
Well, thank you. I'll give you Brendan Walsh.
Thanks so much, David. I thought if I spoke for about half an hour, 35 minutes, so there'll be a bit of time for a discussion at the end. Is that a good idea? That kind of thing we like. So my name is Brendan Walsh, and my first ever job was in March 1979 in a very handsome office in Eccleston Square in West London. And I worked there for 10 years. I was editorial assistant at the Catholic Truth Society. And I was editing pamphlets, weeding out heresies from typescripts, checking the spelling. We used to put the Pope teachers together every month, which was a compendium of teaching by the new Pope we're all terribly excited about, Pope John Paul II. And every day at 12 o'clock, my most important job was to serve a glass of sherry to the General Secretary of the Society, Mr. David Murphy. And I was just saying to David earlier, I haven't seen him for a number of years, but your first boss in any job is somebody, I think, who gives you a model of what a boss is. I don't know if you can remember who your first boss was. It's a bit like the first Prime Minister, the first Pope. They're kind of in your head. That's what a Pope is, or a Prime Minister, or a boss is. And David was a brilliant, lovely boss. He was a lovely man. He made sure, without saying anything, that the work got done, but he let me get on with it in my own way. And I'll never forget how kind he was to me and how funny, and he was just great, a lovely person to work with. And it's really helped me in my work. It showed me, I think, what a good manager, a good boss could be. I'll always be grateful for that. So since I left, I was at the CTS for 10 years, and then briefly I worked in publishing, SBCK, worked at, I was editorial director of a publisher called Darton, Longman and Todd for 7 or 8 years. For about 7 or 8 years, I was the head of communications at CAFOD, the Catholic Church's overseas aid agency. And then 10 years ago, just about almost precisely 10 years ago, Catherine Pepinster, who was the editor of the tablet, she called me to ask if I'd like to have a go at being part-time, it's a part-time job, editor of the Tablet's books pages. And at the time I was living in Youghal, County Cork, and I'd left my job just a few months earlier as editorial director at DLT, Darton, Longman and Todd. And I was helping my mother to nurse my dad, who was dying at home at the time. And he died very contentedly, I remember. In fact, he was even a little impatient. He used to say, "My bags are packed," he used to tell me. And I always thought there was a hint of presumption about what his next destination was going to be. And he died a few weeks later. And after the funeral, I came back to London and I started work at the Tablet's office in Hammersmith for 2 days a week at first. And I'd been a reader of the Tablet for 30 years and I'd written a bit for it for about 15, book reviews, the odd article, that kind of thing. So I knew some of the writers and I knew some of the people working there. And I loved it. I really loved the Tablet. I was one of those people who was not quite brought up on it. I remember when I was first went to church with my parents, there'd be a big stack of universes on the back of church. And we bought the universe. Everybody got the universe. And there was one copy next to this big pile of universes of the Tablet. And that was for Dr. Norton. And Dr. Norton was a kind of local GP. He was also a bibliophile. But, you know, only Dr. Norton could even contemplate buying something as kind of academic and as intellectual as the Tablet. We were a universe family. Well, my dad was a GP. It had, as you know, the universe, there was lots of nuns on tractors in pictures and there was racing tips at the back and that kind of thing. So that was our kind of idea. It was a Catholic red top. But then as I got to know the Tablet, I loved it. It's like a lot of Tablet readers. I had a close emotional relationship with it. I felt I owned it a little bit. And it seemed to me it was intelligent, a bit highbrow, but compassionate, interested in everything, everyone, particularly the things going on in the corner of the picture. And there was no bossy shepherding of people into heaven along tightly prescribed routes. There was a sense of being plugged into one of the great streams of human civilization. And of course, the Tablet has a character. People say it's a bit progressive or liberal or whatever. And I don't mind that, really. I mean, it's fair enough. No one likes to be confined by labels, but that is part of the Tablet sensibility. But it's really important for me, this is why I wanted to like it and still something so precious about it, is it's not a neat manifesto or tidy program. It's a living, growing personality. It's an angle of vision, faithful, honest, generous, inquisitive, irrepressibly reform-minded. And, you know, Catholicism is a matter of the imagination as much as of the intellect. It's a way of living and loving as much as a body of teaching. And the other thing about it is, again, for me, which is important, working at the Tablet, trying to make the Tablet the best it can be, is that its vision of Catholicism isn't inhospitable or narrow or static, but generous, vibrant and dynamic, and it welcomes argument and debate. There's a quote from Pope Francis about the Church as being alive, knowing being unsettled, enlivened. It has a face that is not rigid. It has a body that moves and grows. It has a soft flesh. It is called Jesus Christ. And he's talking about the Church, but he's talking about the best of the Church as something that's living, surprising sometimes. There's a row of postcards on my bookshelves at work in my office, and it's a personal parapet of icons. And there's Dorothy Day, the anarchist who went to Mass every morning. There's Thomas Merton, bold peacemaker who did what he was told by his abbot, at least most of the time. Oscar Romero, whose defence of the poor cost him his life. And the teaching of the church was their indispensable map, but it wasn't their destination. Its precepts are not electric fences to prevent us straying into wickedness, but springboards to propel us towards happiness and flourishing. We need the rules, and we need the referee with his whistle, but it's the game that matters. Popes come and go, papal preoccupations and tones of voice flutter and seesaw. The genius of Catholicism is precisely that it is not seeking to find rest in one register or settlement. It lives in the flashes of movement between them. This is the exuberance and profligacy of God. Whatever sort of Catholic we are or think we are, we need the other sort. As Charles Peguy pointed out, if we arrive at heaven alone, God may look at us and ask, but where are the others? So we combine deep attachment to the church with fierce independence. Try to be a light in the gloom, and perhaps sometimes a wasp at the picnic. So David asked me to have a title for this talk, and what I thought I'd try to do, I've been doing actually today and on the bus, on the tube coming here, was to think of 10 lessons, but things I might have up on the wall of the office to help me do the job well. 10 things to remember, not to lose sight of.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, of course, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Well, that's the problem. If you could speak just a bit louder.
Louder or slower?
Can you use the mic? Where's the mic?
What's this? Is this on?
Yeah, sorry, this won't increase your sound. This is just for the video.
Really?
If you could speak a bit louder for those.
Sure, I'm really sorry. Does anybody want me to go back and start again? Or the other thing I sometimes get is that somebody at the back will say, I can't hear you very well. And somebody at the front will say, I'd be quite happy to change places with you. One of the 10 things that I think we should remember, perhaps all of us should remember this, is to be a caretaker, a custodian. In Traditionis Custodes, that recent document on the traditional Latin Mass that Pope Francis issued, which was not greeted with universal warmth, Pope Francis described a bishop as a traditionis custos, a custodian of tradition. And it's tempting for bishops to think, it all depends on me. And that's a mistake that editors can make as well. And one thing I think any editor of the tablet should remember is that he is just a link in a long chain. We inherit something, we polish it up, we might rearrange the furniture. We, flatter ourselves by having things like strategic reviews and a relaunch. But what we're doing is we're keeping a tradition refreshed, relevant, brushing it up. We should look back with attention and gratitude and grace to receive what is handed on to us. And we look forward expectantly, wishing to convey undiminished the treasure with which we have been entrusted. So it's something I feel that I'm given and will pass on. In a press conference aboard the papal flight back to Rome after one of his visits overseas, the Pope talked about Catholic fundamentalists, was the word he used. who have a nostalgia for returning to the ashes. And he used this kind of language to talk about tradition, which is part of our Catholic faith. We are inheritors, custodians of a tradition. Tradition is the guarantee of the future and not the container of the ashes. It's like roots of a tree which give us nutrition to grow. You will not become like the roots. You will flower, grow, give fruit, and the seeds become roots for other people. The tradition of the church is always in movement, he said. The tradition does not safeguard the ashes. As you know, we're starting in the church a synodal process. Are you fed up of that word yet? Synod and synodality. And when he spoke in Rome last Saturday about synodality, can you hear me, by the way? Is it okay? Am I loud enough? Just put your hand up if I should speak up. He asked people to leave the doors and windows open. Do not limit yourselves to considering only those who attend or think like you do. Allow yourselves to go out to meet and be questioned. Let their questions be your questions. Allow people to walk together. The Spirit shall lead you. Do not be afraid to engage in dialogue, and let yourselves be upset by dialogue. And one thing I think of when I'm thinking about the job and being a custodian of tradition and about being part of a synodal turn in the church is that at the tablet we have a tightrope to walk, because we try to reflect that spirit of synodality, of living with the tension, being a place of dialogue between Catholics of very different views, but at the same time having our own distinctive, clear position. Our feet are firmly planted in the ground of the Second Vatican Council. It's a voice of reform, delivered with vigour and style, but with curiosity and charity and humility. So I think that the tablet, a magazine that's rooted in its own traditions of independence, but it's also a living thing, a magazine of surprises, will connect with a wider readership of just this kind of standard idea of a tablet reader, while maintaining our loyal base. That's one thing I was thinking of coming out tonight. Second point, simpler thing. There's a wonderful feature in the tablet earlier this year. It was in June, where a writer, Morag McInnes, lives on the Orkneys, a Scottish writer. She remembered her friend, the brave, gentle Orkney poet, George Mackay Brown. I'm sure if you don't know his work, I really would recommend it to you. And that work is permeated by his Catholicism. And he once asked, how do I, as a poet, as a writer, how do I present holiness to a godless generation, especially as I know nothing of it myself? He was being humble about his own, not pretending that he himself was particularly holy. How do I put before the world holiness, goodness, when they no longer are familiar with that kind of language? And I think that is part of the task of the tablet. A place of trustworthy professional reporting and vivid, smart, compassionate comment and analysis, but is able to speak the language of the world and the language of heaven. We have to be bilingual, I think, in that way, and that's a real challenge for us. So we have a lot of work to do to develop that bilingual gift. But that is what we're trying to do. You know, another thing this is something that comes naturally to me, is I think it's quite helpful if you're the editor of something. Not to know too much, not to be too clever. I think you need to be inquisitive and just a little bit slow-witted, a little bit dim. I think if you just know the answer to everything, everything you see, everything you read, you can immediately see through it. It doesn't add up, or you take things apart straight away. And I'm not like that. I tend to be one of these people who, if I read something, I tend to say, oh, I think I'd go along with that. And then I read something that has the completely different view. And I think, yeah, well, absolutely right. I'm with that, absolutely. And because I can't quickly take things apart. And what we do, or what I do, is I publish things. I think I know something that's well written, well said, even if the logic might be slightly dodgy. So I publish different ideas out of a sort of curiosity, because I don't really know everything that's going on. I don't have the answer to all the big questions. I don't know exactly what I think about a lot of big questions. And good writers help me think those things through. And I think that's quite good for readers as well, that you have a place where good writers, clever people, bright people who can write well, are saying different things. So my mind is a bit like the letters pages of the tablet, which are just full of dispute and disputation. And I think if I was smarter and was sure I had all the answers, the paper would be trotting out the same things every week. As it is, sometimes some readers are annoyed every week by some things, but I think it's much more fun that you have a paper that is got a bit of tension and disagreement within it. So don't be a know-all is the third thing I would say to recommend as one of the 10 things. Another lesson, another thing to write on the wall is be brave. Be brave. Journalism, it is about trying to serve the truth, trying to tell our readers what is happening, what was said, when it happened, where it happened, simply telling people what happened without imposing our interpretation on things. Accurate, try to be quick, try to get things as near to the truth as possible. Why do I think we have to be brave is the media is in the hands of owners, and people who have got agendas, people who own the media and they want to use it to put over a certain version of the truth. They have interests and agendas. And trying to be independent of that, so that your readers have a sense that they can make up their own minds about what they're reading, what they're hearing. This is never perfect, but if there's good news or bad news, try to tell it straight on the news. There's plenty of room for opinion in a newspaper, but in the news sections, you shouldn't be able to guess from reading the news story whether the person who wrote it voted Tory or Labour at the last election, whether they're a left-wing Catholic or a right-wing Catholic or whatever. Just give them, as best you can, the news. What happened? Journalists, they are like a pack. And there is a groupthink in journalism. Somebody says something, somebody says the other thing. And the difficult thing is to report as freely as you can. And that means not just following the pack, but it also means don't automatically assume the pack is wrong. That's another trap, the kind of reflex contrarian trap. That sometimes what most people are saying, as far as you can tell, is accurate. Just try to look at it with your own fresh eyes and make your own judgment. Not being too suspicious of what other people are saying, but not go along with it just because lots of people are saying it. And you do need to be quite brave to avoid those pressures. Being criticised or trashed or trolled, it doesn't make you wrong, but it doesn't make you right either. So think for yourself, follow the evidence, plough your own furrow. When I first got the job of being the editor of the Tablet, which was 5 years ago, the chair of the trustees at the time, she had a big job in the city. I went to see her, and she was on the top of a big skyscraper overlooking the city. And she had one piece of advice for me. And she said, take risks. I've always remembered that, always been very grateful for it. Because it's easy, I'm old, I'm 60 something, and you know, I don't have years ahead of me editing the Tablet, and I don't have to be too timid or timorous about what we do. I can afford to take risks. Another word I have on this imaginary set of cards on the wall of my office, another lesson, is be humble. None of us is impartial. Don't kid yourself that you don't come to a story with baggage. All storytelling comes from a perspective. We interpret, you can't not interpret things. You're always putting things in a certain order of importance. It's our take on what's happening. And we never see the whole story. And I don't think we should be frightened of that. You know, we interpret things from a Catholic perspective. That's where we have our feet planted in the ground. We honestly seek the truth. We try to tell the truth as best we can, but we bring to that search for truth our own story, our own roots, our own values, our own way of seeing the world. And I think good readers get that and understand it, and it's not something that you should try to disguise or pretend isn't there. You're an honest storyteller, but we bring our own history to our writing, to our journalism. You just have to be alert to the dangers of that and then be comfortable in your Catholic skin. Another lesson is just tell the story. It sounds very simple, but I have to tell you that sometimes we get phone calls from certain people in the church, powerful people, who respect the Tablet's independence, but they would say, I'm not trying to interfere with what you say, far be it from me. Completely respect the independence of the Tablet. But I was reading this leader that you did last week. It was critical of the cardinal, and they'd say, what are you trying to achieve what's your strategy here? You know, that's not really very helpful, saying that can lead to this and lead to that. It's not in the best interests of the kingdom, building the kingdom, you know. And I think part of the job of a good journalist is to avoid the temptation of being too strategic, if you like, to be thinking too much about what can we do that's going to help the church or help build a kingdom or whatever. I think our job is not to be under that kind of pressure. Is to find out as best we can what's happened, check it out, check all the sources, make the phone calls, and there's a famous journalistic quote that if your mother tells you that she loves you. Check it out. Check it out. But if you check it out, if you have the story, just tell the story. It could be something damaging to somebody you really admire. It could be, if you like, your team is shown in a bad light by this story. And I can often have occasions, oh, you know, she's kind of one of us and all that. You've got to just tell people. Again, check it out. Just tell the story and let the cards fall. Another lesson on the wall for how to be a plausible, credible editor of the tablet is shut up and listen. Pay attention. Be prepared to hear things you don't want to hear. Ask people what they think, what their story is. Listen, be attentive, be quiet, watch, be still. Just listen. Another very simple thing is surround yourself with good people. First rule of life, as we all know, is choose your parents well. And I think that's a pretty good lesson for being a journalist as well, is choose the people around you well. I'm not a professional journalist, really. I'm trying to learn it as I go along, but I've surrounded myself with really good professionals. Another really important thing is to make your place of work reflect your values. We're always banging on about values. And that means for the tablet is making sure that as a Catholic newspaper, we go the extra mile with our colleagues, got professional contracts, and we work in a very professional way. But beside that professionalism, that contract, we're friends, you know, and there's a relationship of a little bit of give and take. And I think if you get that mix right, that's incredibly precious, certainly very important for me. Another vital thing I always try to think about is, again, it's a job, it's a profession, but we're telling stories about people, about individuals, about individual lives. And however cynical and hard-bitten journalists can get, we must never forget that when you are telling a story, there are people in it, real people. And as we all know, when you've got a person in front of you, they've got their struggles just like we have. And that's where you meet Christ every day. It's in the face in front of you. And again, you're trying to tell the truth. You're not protecting people. You're not attacking people. But never forget that story is a story in which there are real people. And just tell it with that. Never forget that. We should always tell the whole story if we can. We tell the truth, we tell the story, but it's a time of, as we all know, a time of shame in the church in many ways, and humiliation. And we tell that story completely straightforwardly. We simply tell people what we think has happened. But we try to tell the whole story of the church. We don't hold anything back. But if we write complete about, people sometimes say, not another story of the scandal of abuse. And I always say, that happened, we've got to tell people about it. But we tell so many other stories, stories of sacrifice. If you look at the news pages, they're an extraordinary mix. This is the Catholic world, the Catholic reality. You have a briefing. There could be 12 stories from around the world. And the first one is priest arrested in Malawi for murdering the bishop because he didn't get the job or whatever. Second one is priest heroically goes to the front line in Haiti, setting up some brave, the only people on the ground taking a risk, risking their lives to help people in distress, their religious sisters, going to Myanmar, religious communities incredibly bravely risking their lives, patrolling in front of soldiers, telling them to stop shooting, laying down their life for others. Next story, some appalling story of it could be burglary, theft, it could be abuse. And I think our job is just to put it all out there as much as we can and say to people, that's it, that's all human life is there. And then finally, because I want to have a bit of time at the end for you to, for me to shut up and listen and learn, is be joyful, be thankful. Just remember that, you know, all the things that we're writing about are charged with the things of God, with the divine. Everything that we write about, everything that we tell stories about, everything is significant. Everything matters. And that could be every blade of grass, every breath. Everything is precious. Everything is there. Everything is worth noticing. And then be hopeful, finally. My sense is it's a difficult time for the media, for all kinds of different reasons. But there will always be an appetite, a yearning for a good story. People want to know what's happening. And the challenge is to tell it find the language, to tell it well. But also these days, as we know, people are getting their stories in so many different ways through so many different platforms. And making sure that our content, our storytelling is presented in the way that is easiest for people to access. That's a major challenge, obviously. But my sense is, in a world in which there's so much opinion and noise and blather, and we don't know what to trust, if you can establish a place where people do trust what you're saying, or they know it's not perfect and there are shortcomings, that you're people who are trying to deal honestly, tell people truthfully as best they can what's going on in the world, there's always going to be an appetite and a place for that. So which is why what I do is fantastic fun and incredibly satisfying. But also it's a thing I think has got a real future, and I feel very hopeful about the kind of work that we do. 8:45. I hope some of that was, that you heard it. And do ask me anything at all that you like. I'd really appreciate, actually, if you are readers or not readers, or read other Catholic media. It would be very helpful for me, specific kind of questions or queries or things you like, or why don't you do more of this or less of that, or why you're more like newspaper A or newspaper B. Anything at all you want to ask, I'd be very happy to answer as best I can.
Well, thank you very much on behalf of us all. That was very interesting, inspiring talk. I shall go home tonight and read last week's edition with a new light.
Are you a subscriber, Kevin?
Yes, but I'm really pleased with this online thing. You get it very cheap.
Yeah.
That comes in.
So you're now a digital subscriber?
A digital, yes.
And do you look at it like the PDF, the actual magazine, you look at the pages?
I look at the pages.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, interesting.
The one thing I can't do that I worry about is your Sudoku. I've never ever managed to get one completed. Anyway,
we did briefly stop the Sudoku, and there was clamorings of protest from people who wanted the Sudoku back. There you are.
Right, well, I've got the microphone. For the sake of the recording, you've got to speak into this. Has anybody got a question?
Was that all right, by the way, recording-wise?
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Have you astounded everybody, or has somebody got a question? Oh,
Your covers are very good. Who does those, and how quickly do you
Yeah.
have to work? Which is the busiest night of the week?
What's your name?
Karen
Karen.
Squire.
Karen Squire.
And I am a subscriber. You can look me up. and it gets read.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but about 2 years ago, we changed the cover designer. And I think the covers in the last year or two have been a step up. The thing the designer did was we now have every week, if you're familiar with the tablet, pretty well every week, there's a masthead, which is white at the top and red on top. And we do that now pretty well every week. And the reason for that, the reason I think it works, we do sell more copies now in shops than we used to, a bit more, is it's immediately visually clear that this is the tablet. And even if the picture might not be the best ever, people can straight away see in a crowded newsstand that this is this week's tablet, red on white. And in the past, we had it kind of reversed out of background or that kind of thing. And this punches through, this is the tablet. And that helps us, I think, because the truth is people either like it or they don't. They know what they're getting. We've got incredible loyalty from subscribers and people who have got a relationship with the tablet. It really is extraordinary, the loyalty, the letters I get. And it's a lifeblood. They hate some things in every week. They complain. But they seize it and they read it from cover to cover. So many people. And, for most people going into Smith's have never heard of the tablet. But if you have any kind of relationship with it, you'll see it straight away with these new covers. And the person who does them now, the last 2 years, as well as introducing that new cover, Karen, he also produces the covers every week. And every Sunday, we go to press every Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock. So the date for the Saturday, that goes to press at 7 on a Tuesday. And it's printed on a Tuesday night, and it is delivered to the distributor about 7 or 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. So they go through the post from Wednesday all around the world, and they're delivered second-class post. And they should get to everybody by Friday, but they don't. And that saved us a lot of money having second-class post. It's £50,000 a year, which for us is quite a lot. But it does mean we go to... So it says Saturday, but it's written on a Tuesday night. The cover is briefed on a Sunday, and I pick out 2 or 3... some weeks it's obvious, it's going to be a picture of the Pope, he's made some big speech or something. But usually there are 2 or 3 options. And I give him, you could do the arts lead, there's a fantastic exhibition of Caravaggio. There's an important story about terrible things happening in Tigray. And then there's a really good feature about this. So I'd give him the 3 stories, a few lines from them. I always suggest maybe this kind of thing or that kind of thing. And then on a Monday, at about 5 o'clock, he spends Monday working on it, most of Monday, and he doesn't have a budget for illustrations, so he looks at all the agencies to which we sort of picture agencies, there's 3 or 4, and on a 5 o'clock roughly on a Monday, I get usually about a dozen options, 3 or 4 for each of the 3 stories, and usually, because he's very good, one of those is fine, just the right thing, and then I send him on a Tuesday morning, about midday, all the words for the cover, the cover lines. Sometimes I'd say that one, but do this to it, or something like that, but go back and find some more images on that line. But it's usually pretty quick. He's fantastic. He really is very good. And sometimes he has an image that he then, these designers have these little things they do with images. They add colour or take it back or put 2 images together. He does a bit of that sometimes. Stephen, he's got a very good pedigree. He used to do covers for the Sunday Times magazine, so he's really, really good. So by Tuesday, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the cover is done. It's Sunday, Monday, and I'm on my own in the office most of the time. It is absolutely frantic. There are 32 pages, and on a Monday morning, nothing is edited or designed or anything. So those 2 days, the features, I mean, I've got them all ready, and sometimes something's done the previous week, couldn't find room for it, it goes in that week. But over the weekend, because I edit everything myself or rewrite them, or sometimes you don't have to, but I get all the copy done. So Monday, I send the copy through. We've got very good, what you call copy editors. They don't say that's a boring thing, but they just tidy up the grammar, the capital letters, which I think is done very well normally at the tablet. They make a few mistakes, but the proofreading, the copy editing is very slick, I think, and they make it fit on the page. So that happens. So the copy editors are working on things, and then I get the proofs Monday night, Tuesday morning. The leaders, we have a leader writer, Clifford Longley. I do some of them, but I talk to him on a Monday morning at 11 o'clock. Sorry, Tuesday morning at 10:45. I speak to Cliff Longley, we've kind of had a little bit of exchange over the weekend what the subjects might be, and we agree what the editorial line will be for these 2 leading articles, 500 words each. And so let's give the government a real kicking about their immigration policy, and let's sort out China. So, he said, right, he goes off, and 2 hours later, the kicking the terrible immigration policy. And then another hour and a half later, we've got China sorted out. And then I kind of look at, I make a few tweets, a bit fussy. Then I send it back to Cliff, is this okay? And he says, why didn't you leave it as it was? We had a bit of an argument, and then we put it through. And then that is on the page at maybe 6:30, and I'm reading the leaders, and in 15 minutes we're going to press. Now, you can do, and all the other stories are the same. It's all, it really is frantic. And that's fine, you can do it because it's the same rhythm every week. Is what happens, and this has happened in my time, is at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, the Pope dies, or some huge story like that. And what happened 9 years ago, and it was when I was in the office, but I wasn't the editor, it was Catherine Pepinster was the editor. It was 5:30 when the white smoke appeared, and we knew it was Bergoglio. Well, actually, it's worse than that. It was like 5 o'clock, the white smoke appears, so you know there's going to be an announcement, but you don't know who it's going to be. You got 45 minutes, so you stop the press, and you don't know who you're going to be writing about, and you ring up the printer, and you can get, look, this is dead urgent. Can you give us another hour and a half, couple of hours? And we were incredibly lucky, I remember, with Pope Francis, that there was somebody had written something about it, and we cobbled it together. And the leading 1,500 words was about Pope Francis, and on the cover, it had him waving, there's that famous image that's all over the place now, of him coming to the balcony, Habemus Papam Francis. And we got the image, 7:30, 7:45, stuck it on the cover, and off it went to press. But had it been an hour or two later, too late, or I don't know. So that kind of thing. But it's fantastic. If you're in the office, it is extraordinary. That going up to the deadline. And it's every week. It is pretty... And because you miss something, you go, oh God, you got something wrong, which you often do. And then, you've said what? If you come out and you say something and there's a mistake.
Yes, I remember that day, and the Catholic Herald couldn't sorry, they were stuck with sort of holding statements.
They were.
Which I think is why, although they never admitted it, they abandoned the newspaper format. Yeah. But so it was, anyway, Pope's hopes are
didn't
not
have that story
dying
that
every
quite
week,
right.
so it's.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
deadlines are still important in weekly publishing.
Well, they're still important, but what people say now is that in the world of where people get their news online, you know, if you're a bit of a swot on the Catholic Church, you're not waiting for the paper to arrive through your door to find out who the new Pope is, you know. So the news pages are still, I think, the weekly newspapers on the page are still very important to a lot of people because that's where they find out who the new bishop of, you know, of Cork and Ross is or whatever. And that's quite important for them. That's how they find, because they're not, you know, they're not going to be looking at online, and they're not mad nerds about Catholic news. This gives them a weekly sum-up, roundup of what's happening in the world. But yeah, I think you can be less kind of neurotic about getting everything into the paper on time, because you have got the option of just putting it up online, and people do increasingly get their news from Twitter and Facebook and social media and the website.
Would you like to give us some idea of a profile of the readers?
Yeah.
To what extent do the clergy read it as opposed to the laity?
Yeah. What's your name?
Anthony Aldridge.
Anthony. Yeah. You're not in PR or public relations, Anthony?
No, I'm not.
No, you're looking for work.
No,
because
but-
that is an exercise that we do every now and
I'm
again.
avoiding work.
But it hasn't been done for about 6 or 7 years. And we're having a bit of a review. And we do want to renew again just who is reading the tablet. I mean, we know things like they're largely over 50. Something that surprises me is that there are more male than female readers. This is going back 5 or 6 years. And they are aging. The average is getting older. At least that was true 5 years ago. And that's obviously a real worry, you know, because your readers are dying, you know. But the overall subscriptions are slightly up. They were falling 5 years ago when I took over. And there's a new chief executive who is absolutely fantastic, a wonderful businesswoman. And 5 years ago, there was real worries the tablet would have to close down. We were losing money every year. And subscriptions were dropping about 5% a year. So they were going down. And we're not booming. We haven't turned subscriptions out flying up, but we've stopped that decline. And we are no longer losing money. And the board is absolutely delighted. And all the feedback is good, and the digital sales are going up. So it's a very difficult media environment, really difficult. Advertisers are harder and harder to get. I don't know, you know, you don't see young people reading weekly papers anymore. The Universe has gone bust. Herald no longer operating every week. So we're really proud, actually, of what we've done at the tablet. Used to be, you know, the big stacks of the big stacks of the Universe in one tablet. Now there's no Universe, there's no Herald, there's just the tablet, and I think that's pretty amazing. I'm really proud
Do
of
the
that.
clergy subscribe to it? To any
One of
great
the
extent?
things, Anthony, that's helped us is, you know, in a weird way, is that there are 2,000 parishes. Only about 400 or 500, the parish priest will take the tablet. Now, sometimes they say it's because it's too expensive or nobody wants it, but sometimes they say it's not a Catholic newspaper. And now they would say is, some of them would get the point they say, you're not critical enough of the Holy Father to be a proper Catholic newspaper. I mean, that's almost, you know, what some of them are coming from. Now, that's meant that our subscriptions, our readers, are largely subscribers. They order it, they get it through the post. We only have, I think we used to have 1,100 weekly copies sold in church in those 500 parishes. Now, because of not hostility, but some hostility, and some just that we were too expensive or too you know, they have a view of the tablet as being highbrow, and our readers don't want all that dense copy. A rather patronising view about their congregation. But that's meant that in the devastation of the COVID thing, where churches are being closed, so newspapers reliant on parish sales have all been completely devastated. Because of our model of being a subscription base, we've lost readers, about 5% of readers. 5% of readers are in church sales, and about half of those have gone. So that's bad news. You know, we've lost 500 readers every week, which is a lot of money. But other competitors, 60% of their readership was in church. Well, that's wiped out. And that's in a really bad spot. So my sense is actually that there's still a lot of priests don't like the tablet. A lot of bishops are very mistrustful of it. But I hope that's got a bit better in the last 5 years. I think, to be fair, there was a little bit of relish in catching bishops out, kind of getting at them a bit. Oh, we found out that, you know, Bishop so-and-so's got a Mercedes or something. You know, great news. And I don't like that. It's not our job to go after priests or bishops. We've got a professional, it's really important to have a good professional relationship where they understand what I've been talking about, what we're trying to do. And in my view, in the long run, it's really important. If you do your job, you tell the truth, in the long run, that's not going to harm the church. It might look in the short run, it's a bit embarrassing, I don't say that. In the long run, the truth never harms the church. It can be very uncomfortable in the short run, but in the long run, the truth never harms the church. That's a really important principle for me. And I think some of the bishops, they do get it. We're not out to get them or catch them out. We hold them to account. They say one thing and they're not doing it, so we point that out to readers, but not in any spirit of gleeful catching them out. I don't think that's the right attitude at all. You know, we're all the people of God. We're all trying to get to heaven, and going after authority for its own sake isn't something, a tone I don't think we should have. But we do still have a little bit, there's that sense that some bishops and priests have, that the tablet is somehow after us or isn't on our side, or they open it up and what they're moaning about now. So some of that's around.
I think from a laity point of view, it's very nice to have some sort of Catholic perspective on things when you're reading so much the Murdoch press. Or the
Sure, yeah, yeah.
Things like that. Each week it's nice to have some comment on current affairs.
Yeah, yeah.
From a Catholic perspective.
Yeah. Do you think we do that enough, or would you like more of that, or?
I don't think you do as much as you used to do.
Yeah, no, we don't. You're right. That was a kind of a bit of a conscious thing of me, really, that I thought we do want to have a take on what's happening, but it felt to me as if some of the things we used to do about the National Health Service or whatever, some issue of the day, it could actually be appearing in The Economist. You know, it wasn't really a Catholic take on things. It was just something about troubles in the Tory party or shipbuilding industry going bust or something. And it felt current affairs, fine, but I thought things you could get somewhere else. So I tend to be, you know, I have more about history or ideas or issues. That's maybe what I prefer to read. A little bit London Review of Books about it, maybe. But I kind of prefer that kind of piece. Although we do, if we can get it, really good foreign policy pieces, that just looking at things from a slightly different angle. Home news pieces, obviously, that look at things from a slightly different view. But I'm not sure readers, I think some disagree with me about this. They want something about the crisis in the National Health Service, and then you turn the page and there's some other issue of the day, you know, the Russia in interfering in the Ukraine, you know. And they're good things, the important things happening in the world, but I don't know, I'm just wary of, it's trying to keep the tablet distinct and not just a current affairs, like weekly.
Sorry to go back to what you were talking about, subscribers and readers.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Do you know how many non-Catholics, not you, or
Good
people of other
question.
denominations?
Yeah. I'm not sure the numbers. We're trying to find out when we do this survey. But I have to tell you that if I ever have any dealings with a Catholic, with an Anglican priest or bishop, they're incredibly, supportive of the tablets. Best Christian thing. Church Times is awful. You're great. Catholic priests and bishops frown. Tablet. Call yourself a Catholic Weekly. Whereas the Anglicans, it's marvelous, great, brilliant, and they like it. In my experience, they want it to be a Catholic weekly. Obviously, it's ecumenical minded, but it's not that they want a kind of inter-church weekly paper. They like a Catholic weekly with a kind of a London and that tells them what's happening in the Catholic world, pays attention, obviously, to the big news in the interfaith world. That's important. But they like it because of its journalism. They love the culture pages, because the books and the arts, and they're grown up. It's not just the films and the TV and the books. They're not just Christian books or Christian films. They're just, thoughtful Catholics want to read about what's good in the opera at the moment. They don't just want to have read about books that are theology books or whatever. So we've got a really good positive relationship with not just Anglicans, but thoughtful evangelicals, all the rest of it. And one of the issues for us is how much you should adjust the content to kind of increase that number of non-readers who aren't Catholics. And I'm a bit wary of it losing its Catholic identity, because I think a lot of readers who aren't Catholics quite like the fact that it's Catholic, but of a broad-minded kind. And not have lots and lots of Anglican columnists and so on just for the sake of it. I'm not sure. But it's a really, we've got such a good relationship with Church of England and the other churches.
I think we've probably got time for one more, because we've got a bit of a regime now for closing up. Because
fair enough, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry. Do you want?
We have two questions. We can have two. Is Martin not going to ask me a question? I'm trembling.
All right.
He's the only one who might, rip me apart.
Yes, bring back the acrostic.
The acrostic. Yeah, we are bringing back. Has David Harding been in touch? No, we do want the acrostic this Christmas. I mean, the tablet nearly collapsed with protest. There were people throwing bricks through the window. We've been having Martin Redfern's acrostic for the last 40 years, and it slipped this Christmas for the first time, and it's the nearest thing I ever got to being, hauled out and whipped in the street. There were so many people outraged. So we are having the acrostic back. I think have you got one in the bank?
Well, that's right.
Yeah, you have, exactly. Going in the bank. Yeah.
But one of the side effects was you passed on one of the letters protesting.
Yeah, that's right.
And a very interesting correspondence.
Oh, really?
For about 6 months.
So you got it well in that case. Send it in. Send it in to David Harding. Yeah. So the acrostic is back. That is the collapse of subscriptions for this year saved.
So my question is linked slightly to Martin's point.
The Sudoku you're bothered about, the crossword.
So my question really is, what proportion of your copy, your published copy, is if you like, in-house journalists, and what proportion, if you like, are correspondents, contributors, and whatever?
Yeah, that's a good question. The news, we have 4 in-house journalists, full-time, 5, including Rome, and they produce almost all the news copy, online and in print. And they're full-time tablet journalists. We're very lucky. We have got full-time journalists who have got enough time, because a lot of journalism is what you call churnalism. They get the story from the PR, the press release, and they just summarise it and stick it in and on to the next story. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you've got time to do this, you get the press release that says this charity says it's earned this amount this year, or it's opened a new facility, or a school has opened, or an announcement. If you've got time, you make a few phone calls and you learn that the press release is true, but absolutely everybody's furious because they've done this rather than that, and there's a story behind it. And you can only add that kind of value by spending time on chasing it up. Who's this from, and what do you think, and that thing. So we have journalists who can do that, and in fact they're the only. It's a bit alarming in a way, but since the national papers don't really have full-time religious correspondence, they're part of a portfolio of things that they're doing now. There really isn't anybody holding the church to account, the bishops to account. A good example is the lectionary is a good example. We've got a new lectionary coming up, and it's going to be this English Standard Version. And the bishops just thought this would be a good idea, they've got it on train, and they don't tell anybody. Now, unless there's people making calls and raising this issue, asking them questions, they can just do what they like. It's not that we're telling you what to do. Well, you are telling you what to do, but it's more, explain yourselves. Let's talk about this. Let's consult. And in fact, in Ireland, I think partly because of what the tablet has kind of raised this issue, they are going to bring in they're going to have a different lectionary. They're going to use the revised NJB, which is a much better translation, I think. So the question about, we've got journalists, and they do write the copy, but we also have correspondence. Yeah. So the foreign news editor has about 20 people who on a Sunday would send him what you call a pitch. They'd say just a 2-line thing. Here's a possible story from El Salvador, from Argentina. For these agencies send those in as well. So on a Monday morning at 1 o'clock, we have a news meeting in which you have your news lists, and the foreign editor would have 10 or 12 briefings, 5 or 6 main stories, just 2-liners. We go through them, and that's when we decide maybe not that one but this one. So you're putting together your news. Now, a lot of those things on the news list for foreign news are pictures, are stories sent in by the guy in America. We've got an American correspondent. Now, they're not full-time with the tablet, but you pay them 50 quid, 60 quid, depending how many words, and they're freelancers. So we have a combination of editors and news writers in-house and correspondents overseas. And again, that's done. We decide on the news list on a Monday lunchtime, and by Monday night, they're all the copies, all putting together, putting them on the page.
So in terms of proportion,
the stuff at the front that's me really. I commission. I've got my eyes open. People do offer things, and I have an idea. I use because I was in publishing. I've been around for a while. I mean, the risk is that one person has got a limited knowledge of who the good writers are. So I've got to, take advice on that. But I kind of ask people, would you like to write about this, write about that? And people offer things to us. So most of the stuff at the front is stuff that's written for a fee, 150, 200 quid. Yeah. They're academics, they're writers. Same with the writers who do the books and the arts pages. So it's all commissioned stuff. We have occasionally in-house people write a column or a feature, and that would be part of their salary. But most of it, every week I have a sign off the payments for contributors, and it's £3,000 a week that we spend to all, adding up all the different 200 for him, 150 for that, and it comes to about £3,000 a week.
Okay. Thank you very much. Barry? No. Oh, it's finished. Okay.
Right, well, I think we've done, that's been very enjoyable. One of the things you didn't say that you have to be is a good salesman. I think you've proved, actually, that from the tablet point of view, that you are an excellent
Kevin? Well, I think it's really important not to do the hard sell. It's just, that's what it is. And,
of course you must, of course you must. Anyway, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for coming
thank you
tonight.
so much. I really enjoyed it.
It's
really helpful to me. Thank you.